Welcome to our third episode, The Founder's Journey. My name is Maggie Sanchez, your host for this exciting digital series, Pathways to Inclusive Entrepreneurship. We're going to start with your founder's journey. What was the inspiration behind your startup?
I would say, like most entrepreneurs, I founded Landit trying to solve my own personal pain point, which was a career inflection point. So chemical engineer by training, that means my teenage boys think I know something about math and science, and started off in engineering and product development at Procter & Gamble. Got recruited away to join a startup. That's where I caught the bug. I'm like, this is great. How do I do this for more people? I discovered the beautiful world of venture capital. So I was able to break in, one of the few women and women of color. And I was a general partner for over a decade, and I thought that was going to be it. But after a decade, I didn't want to do that anymore. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. And everyone expected me to know, including myself. And it felt pretty uncomfortable because no one walks around saying, well, don't know what to do next, or I'm feeling less than confident, because there's a social cost to doing so. And then I realized if it was challenging for me and I had all the support in the world and people who were kind of cheering me on, then it must be insurmountable for others. And then I realized that in trying to solve that I could unlock the potential and change the landscape of the workplace and who gets to have a seat at the table. You can't have half of the population disenfranchised, not because they want to be, but because they don't have a path and they don't have access. So that's how Landit came to be.
So I started Everlywell, like many founders, based on my own personal experience that I had with the healthcare system, and just knowing that I was super passionate about solving a problem. In my late 20s, I had a really bad experience with an odyssey of doctors to diagnose some basic hormone and vitamin deficiencies, really focused on the fact that I had to pay thousands of dollars out of pocket or towards my deductible for a bunch of different lab tests, none of which I got the results for, or I had any useful data from, or I even frankly was able to get a real interpretation from any one of my doctors. And so it was that experience that really prompted me to realize that this was a huge problem that every person who needs a medical diagnosis goes through, and there had to be a better way to bring technology to the process and make it better for the actual patient, really the consumer of healthcare, which is you and me.
So the journey to entrepreneurship for me has been sort of a winding one. I grew up as the child of small business owners, so I've always had that influence around me. But it took me quite some time to find my way to it. I started my career very, I would say, traditionally at Procter & Gamble, at large companies, had an incredible experience running and building big brands, big consumer brands. Everywhere at Starbucks and Adidas. But my mind started to go towards the calculus of what am I spending my days on? And the pain and friction that parents kind of face every single day. And I started to have these questions about why were things feeling so broken as a new parent? And it would take until having our second daughter a couple of years later for me to actually kind of jump into my first main startup, Poppy, which was focused on solving childcare for families.
So there's really two companies right now that is near and dear to me. One, that combination of what we call in the care industry being sandwiched between childcare and senior care was really the inspiration that started a company called care.com that I founded 16 years ago. And then took it public in 2014 and ran that for about 7.5 years. And then the second founder's journey story, and you'll notice this about me and social impact, is that we then sold care.com February 2020 to IAC. Now, fast forward, I'm a private equity venture partner at NEA, a private equity firm. And I was doing diligence on a company called YGG. And I watched this documentary. And in this documentary was a grandmother who had downloaded a crypto wallet, purchased cryptocurrency, and was making more than the average rural wage in a local province in the Philippines in this new technology. And so what really inspired me was, how do we create impact and help people like this grandmother, Lola Vergi? So started a new organization in ed tech called ProofofLearn, where we want to be the leading ed tech platform in the metaverse. And our very first project is training Web 2 to Web 3 developers.
I think I had a pretty non-traditional path to starting a company. I actually started my career in management consulting out in New York for about 2.5 years, and then thought I wanted to go into private equity or working at a hedge fund, and interviewed at a bunch of different firms, KKR, TPG, like all the top firms, and couldn't get a job. Mostly because they kept saying that I hadn't been an investment banker, so I couldn't do the Excel modeling as fast as they expected. And after I think probably like my 15th or 20th rejection, I just kind of had this moment where I was reading more and more TechCrunch articles about the tech industry, because I was going earlier and earlier stage in terms of growth equity firms. And so that was sort of one of those light bulb moments of, this is where it's kind of attracting me, and I'm not having much success in this industry. Maybe I should consider it. And so I moved to San Francisco in 2013. And my very first job was as an engineer at a previous payment startup by the name of Balanced. And so at the time, I had no interest in payments. I had no interest really in fintech, but just really connected with the founder. He's a Black engineer from Tucson, Arizona, and I'm Mexican. Parents immigrated from Mexico back in the 60s, but a lot of my friends are Black. And so we kind of had this moment of seeing ourselves in each other, and he kind of took me under his wing. And I knew I didn't have the technical chops to join that startup, and just went into the interview and told them not to give me the technical interview, because I knew I wasn't going to be technical enough yet, but that I promised them that I would go in and be the first person in every single day and the last one out, and I would do whatever it took. And they gave me the job, and I ended up getting a full-time job there. Was there for about 2.5 years. And that was really what launched my engineering career, my expertise, I guess, in the payments industry, and really set the foundation for starting Finix, which is a payment startup.
Access to capital is often regarded as one of the toughest challenges for any entrepreneur. What was the hardest part? And do you think there was anything unique about being a female founder or founder of color?
I think there's really three things that are really key to it. First one is having grit. The second one is really practicing your pitch and really honing it. And the third one is really running a process. And so I like to think about fundraising as both an art and a science. And so when it comes to creating a great pitch, the first part of it is just realizing at the very beginning that you are going to suck and that you're going to be very bad at the first few pitches that you do. And so that's where grit really comes in. I think I probably got rejected maybe 75, 85 times before I got my first yes. And it's okay to suck at this, right? There's not you don't go to school for fundraising or pitching. And I think that's a very key characteristic that any founder has to have, is realizing that almost every single job that you're going to have at the company, and as a founder, you will pretty much have every single job at the company, you won't be great at it. And that's okay. The second part that I would say is really practicing and by yourself, practicing with others, practicing with your VC friends, practicing with your family, just really trying to hone that story, because a big part of it really is nailing the narrative. It's about the storytelling aspect.
Relatability to the specific issues that they're funding matters a lot, whether that's early stages, because again, it's a hope and prayer deck and a team. And so that attachment to the intuition of why they would invest and how they can relate to it matters. But I found relatability also matters even by taking a company public, because I remember pitching the concept of care.com, and a bunch of analysts, mostly majority men, were behind their computers and they just wanted to plug in the number into their computer. And many did not have kids yet. Many did not have pets to take care of because they were juggling banking, investment banking job. Many did not have aging parents yet. And so for Care, even the relatability later as a public company also mattered. I remember when our CFO, who was new, Michael Eckenberg, joined us on the team, and he started joining me on the investment meetings, and we would, do these road shows. I said to him, it's going to be different if there's a woman in the room, if it's a group session that we're trying to educate them on care.com. And when you see that, the conversation will change. And in fact, it did happen. And he was very surprised by it. We got a question from a male investor who typically always starts with, why would I need care? I hire a nanny, and why would I need care.com after that? And when there's a woman in the room, she will say, I don't know about you, but you don't understand that hiring caregiving is difficult, and the turnover is high, and there's always different needs in the household. And I've used care.com 8 times, so I don't know that your question's relevant. So you add one woman in the room and the conversation changes.
I speak about raising money often. I am a solo female founder, first-time founder, non-technical, and I was raising money for an idea that I had no industry experience in, and I was based in Texas. I had a lot working against me. Perhaps what I had working for me is, frankly, I'm white, which is, as we know, a significant benefit, unfortunately, as well as an HBS grad. Those were the only 2 factors that I think fit any kind of a pattern recognition for investors. And I had so many no's. There were, frankly, male founders around me raising term sheets, pre-product market fit, at 3 or 4 times the valuation. I had people tell me it was a terrible idea and it would never work. In fact, the way that I used to get meetings is that the staff at VC firms, who are typically female, the admin staff, the recruiting staff, or the spouses of partners would say, hey, we're using this incredible company. You should talk to them. That's not unusual in the sense that it's not uncommon for investors to want to invest in things that they know and understand the problem. But that means because there were and are so few female venture investors, there's inherently an information asymmetry about the problem.
So I would say fundraising is probably only second to having a simultaneous root canal on every last single one of the things in your mouth. But I would say it's challenging for most people, but it's really challenging when it comes to either being a woman or a person of color. That's why only less than 1% are actually able to secure financing. But that means if you're not in the room, then it's even more challenging. I was fortunate in the end to have had allies and others that invested, but the process to get there was quite challenging. And that's when I realized the importance of product market founder fit, not just product market fit, but also your proxies for success. And so as a first-time founder, even though I had worked for quite some time, I had to surround myself with people to de-risk what this looked like.
We talk about this, or it's talked about often, but in VCs, it's the game of big numbers, in fact, because a lot of investments are going to go to zero. Some will maybe return just the capital, or maybe 1 or 2x, but the ones that they're really going for are the 10x plus. That's how the vein in which a founder needs to pitch or sell the VC on how is this the best place to put that $1 that is disproportionately going to get you that 10x.
Based on your success as a founder, what is your advice to female founders and founders of color? What can they do to get their business off the ground more quickly and raise money?
It comes down to access and acceleration. How do you accelerate an entrepreneur's time to goal? In the beginning, it's just like, who can help me with product? I have the vision. I know where I'm going, but what are the things that you need to know so that you can have those proof points? It's almost as if you are giving people a playbook, but part and parcel with that, you have to have the people who have been there and done that, kind of that board of advisors that are activated. Whether it is they're going to sit down, they're going to whiteboard with you, or they're going to make introductions, or they're going to make it one size fits one.
The second is a sense of authentic boldness is the key piece of advice I always give, which is there's always this, it feels like diametric opposites between those 2 words. How can you be authentic and vulnerable and yet be bold? And I often say authenticity drives, and that vulnerability, in fact, shows your strength and confidence that you're open. And investors actually really like that this person is going to be transparent. We're going to give them give them our money, and they're going to be responsible around it and can talk to us and get our advice. And the boldness is the willingness to take risk. And somehow that sense of vulnerability is an inner confidence to go take risk and try different things so that you can learn.
You have to have a thick skin. You also have to take feedback and understand when the feedback is real and when it's really something to ignore. And so that can be a really hard process because mentally you have to be ready for a lot of rejection. And yet you have to be able to still come back to the table and say, okay, I'm going to take this under advisement. I'm going to change my story. I'm going to work on these things before I go back out to raise. So I think having some advisors who are neutral to the process and can really help you understand what you need to focus on and what you can ignore is really important. And then the last thing I would say is you have to start early, especially as an underrepresented founder, female, person of color, et cetera, non-traditional background. I think that you have to start even 1 to 2 years before. Now, that can be really hard if you've just now started your company. But for example, our first institutional money from a fund came from someone I had pitched to 18 months before. And I started to build a lot of those relationships. It was a no before, but once we started to build traction, it became something where they were kind of knocking on my door to invest. Take a no seriously, but unpack it, understand the nature of it, and really start to build those relationships as early as you can in the process, especially if you're a first-time founder.
One of my favorite questions, what has been your biggest aha moment?
That the journey of building and creating at the core of it is really in service of others. And that's a hard one because as an entrepreneur, every day you have to get up and motivate yourself. And there's just a lot of voices in your head that you have to deal through. And I just come down to the confidence and the ability to conquer difficulty is to sometimes have an out-of-body experience that says it's less about me and it's about the people I'm serving, the purpose in my heart, for my team, how we're going to make a difference. Because life's short. And so I think that message, if you're clear in your head, can get you through many things, and it powers the resilience to get through it and to just build for others is really what I want to share.
I think it probably goes back to finding that very, very, very initial product market fit. Before we'd raised our Series A, we'd raised a little bit of money. And I remember I had like 4 employees and we couldn't actually get customers to buy the product. Now, to be fair, we'd only been at it about 6 weeks, but in my mind, that was enough. And we were going to throw in the towel. And one of our first employees said, give me 2 more months. And I remember we used Stripe as our payments processing, and I had every single transaction set to ding my phone. And I remember it's like clockwork. There were a couple weeks where it started dinging a little more frequently. I just remember all of a sudden the dings started coming multiple an hour and then multiple a minute. And then it just stayed. And so that is sort of, to me, is a really clear representation of what it looks like and feels like when you finally get product market fit.
I think the biggest aha moment is that there's really no secret sauce or secret recipe that's out there that somebody has that you're not capable of achieving something, right? When you think about startups and you read about these individuals in TechCrunch, you think that, maybe they're smarter, they're, harder working, or they have some secret genius idea that you just don't have. That's not real. I've met all these people, and when you sort of, get into the room, right, and you kind of look around, you're like, you're just as capable, if not more capable, than these individuals because you had to work twice as hard to get there. And I think, being a part of these, incredible portfolios, being backed by some of the best venture capitalists, that aha moment is very liberating and inspiring to just know like you can do it. There's often a sense of sort of imposter syndrome, but you are more than capable. It's about getting out there and putting in the hours. It's about putting yourself in positions that make you uncomfortable, and just knowing that you just have to keep going. That's the secret part of a lot of this stuff, is that most of these folks who made it just didn't quit.
Another favorite question is leadership. We know leadership is critical to building a startup and leading a team. What has been your experience?
Building and managing a team is the hardest part of, I think, any founder or frankly, any leader's job in any company. I think the team is both what makes and breaks the company. There's a lot, when you are part of a really fast growing startup, there's a lot of learning and there's a lot of experience compressed into a very short amount of time. And so it's really about who can scale with the company, who, you could work at a startup for 18 months and it's like 7 years at another company. And a lot of it goes back to making sure that I, as CEO, am reflecting on who am I as a leader? Where are my gaps? Where do I need to fill in from other types of leaders that I can hire? And what's the very best talent that I can get on the team?
I think one of the key things that I've learned over the last few years is really that the team and the entire company, for that fact, really follows your energy. Both positivity and negativity are really incredibly contagious. And so when you're happy and you're up and you're energized, the team feels it. They feed on that. It inspires them to work harder, faster. It makes a much more energetic and collaborative environment. But on the flip side, if you're stressed, if you're not taking care of yourself, if you're terse with people, that will also trickle through the entire organization. So a key part of really managing the team is managing those dynamics as well, and understanding that you're always being watched. And that whether it's your negativity or somebody else's negativity that you have on the team, it can be very toxic, and you have to cut it out like a cancer to make sure that you can have a really healthy team dynamic. And I think the last part is that any healthy team, any successful team is going to have to rely on a really strong degree of trust. And when it comes to starting a company, there's a lot of things that are going to go wrong. There's going to be a lot of high pressure situations. And the only way to get through and persevere in those moments is based on the relationships that you have with each of your team members.
Yeah, team is it's probably one of the most critical things, and it's probably the trickiest things. What increases the probability of success for this idea, this company, to actually make it? And having multiple people that share a vision that can carry this little spark and let it continue to, turn into a flame, turn into a blaze, that's really critical.
One of the key things on the journey of building teams in my life is really focus on long-term relationships. I think when you start to attract people, they want to know that you are there for them throughout their careers rather than the transactional specific thing that needs to happen for the company. I think it's being true to the humanity of respect and really seeing people that makes a difference in building teams.
Thank you to all of our luminaries today.